Baylan Skoll tells you he wants to break the cycle. He stands there on that dead moon, staring into something ancient, something buried beneath millennia of silence and dust, and he says, "I'm going to end this. I'm going to find the beginning, and none of this will ever happen again." And you look at him and you think, maybe he's right. Maybe the Jedi failed. Maybe the Sith won by proxy. Maybe the whole system is rot from the inside out. And maybe one man walking away from all of it is the sanest thing anyone's done in 1,000 years. And that's the trick, isn't it? That's the whole beautiful, poisonous trick of him. Because you want him to be right. You want the lone warrior who saw through the dogma to actually have the answer. You want there to be someone out there who looked at the wreckage of the Jedi Order and said, I see the thread, I see where it all went wrong, and I'm going to pull it out at the root. But here's the thing nobody wants to say out loud. He is not a liberator. He is not a philosopher. He is not the man who looked at the Force and said, I see something better. He is a man who looked at the Force and said, I want to own what started it. And there is a word for that in every tradition he claims to have transcended. And that word is Sith. Not the cartoon version, not the red lightsaber and the cackling in the throne room. No, the real version, the quiet one, the one that whispers you deserve more than service. You deserve to be the origin. And Baylan heard that whisper, and he called it enlightenment, and he walked into the dark, and he left a 17-year-old girl bleeding in the dirt because she wasn't useful anymore, and he didn't even look back, and he tells himself that's not cruelty, that's transcendence, and that right there is the most dangerous lie in the entire galaxy, the lie that abandonment is philosophy. So no, I'm not going to give him the benefit of the doubt. I'm not going to frame this as a moral gray area where both sides have a point. And my job here, in the next 30 minutes, is to drag that choice into the light and make you look at it, really look at it, without the music, without the mystique, without the romantic framing of the lonely wanderer, just a man, and what he actually did, and who he actually left behind, and whether the galaxy is better or worse because he decided his personal epiphany mattered more than every living soul he was sworn to protect. Let's start with what makes Baylan Skoll so seductive as a character, because I think we need to be honest about why he works, why people watch him and feel that pull. The Jedi Order, as we've seen it across every era of storytelling, calcifies. It becomes a bureaucracy. It becomes a set of rules handed down by people who stopped feeling the Force 3 generations ago and just kept writing policy documents. And then the Sith come along and they're the opposite. They're all appetite, all hunger, all I will take what I want from the Force and bend the galaxy to match my wanting. And for a while, it seems like those are your only two options, stagnation or consumption, the monastery or the slaughterhouse. And then Baylan walks in and he says, no, there's a third thing. There's a door, neither of them opened, and I'm going to walk through it. And God, that's compelling. That's the most compelling sentence in any mythology. The idea that the binary is false, that the two systems everyone's been fighting over are both just symptoms of something deeper, and that someone, finally, is going to go to the source. He rejects the Jedi's paralysis, their inability to adapt, their insistence that the way things were done 1,000 years ago is the way they must be done forever. And he rejects the Sith's nihilism, their reduction of the Force to a weapon, their belief that power is its own justification. He says, I'm not interested in ruling, and I'm not interested in serving. I'm interested in understanding. And you hear that, and you think, okay, this is the character who's going to reframe everything. This is the one who's going to show us what the Force actually is underneath all the institutional baggage. And maybe he would have been. Maybe in another story, in another writer's hands. Baylan Skoll is the prophet, the one who walks into the desert and comes back with something genuinely new. But that's not the story we got. The story we got is a man who mistook his obsession for revelation, who looked at Paradia and didn't see a truth. He saw a mirror. He saw the shape of his own need for control reflected back at him and called it cosmic destiny. Because here's what finding the beginning actually means when you strip the poetry away. It means you don't trust the present. It means you look at the living Force, the Force that is flowing through every creature in this room right now, the Force that is keeping a child's heart beating on a backwater planet you will never visit, and you say, that's not enough. That's not the real thing. I need to go further back. I need to find the engine room. I need to find where it was built. And that impulse, that refusal to accept the Force as it is, as it manifests, as it serves, is not enlightenment. It is the exact same impulse that drives a Sith Lord to seek immortality, the exact same refusal to accept the terms of existence, the exact same insistence that I will not participate in this system as it is. I will go behind the curtain and grab the machinery with my bare hands. Baylan calls it curiosity. He calls it the search for truth. But curiosity doesn't leave bodies. Curiosity doesn't require you to manipulate a government, to destabilize a fragile republic, to treat your own apprentice as a disposable asset. Curiosity doesn't demand that you walk past suffering because it's not grand enough, because it's not relevant to your archaeological dig into the origins of the cosmos. What Baylan has is not intellectual hunger. What Baylan has is the need to be the one who knows, the one who stands at the source and controls the flow. And that need has a name, and it is not wisdom, it is dominion. And now we have to talk about the phrase itself, the one he keeps repeating, the one that's become his entire identity: I will break the cycle. Say it enough times and it sounds noble. Say it with enough gravity, with enough weariness in your voice, with enough weight of history behind your eyes, and people will believe you. They'll believe that this man has seen the pattern, the endless war between light and dark, the pendulum swinging back and forth for 10,000 years, Jedi rising, Jedi falling, Sith falling, and he's going to step outside the pendulum. He's going to find the fulcrum and snap it in half, and the galaxy will finally be free. And I want to believe that too. I want to believe that someone can end it. But you have to look at what he's actually doing, not what he's saying. Because the rhetoric and the reality are not the same thing. They are not even in the same room. They are not even on the same planet. Baylan Skoll says he wants to end the cycle of violence. And in the same breath, in the same story arc, he is creating violence. He is destabilizing the New Republic, which is already fragile, already struggling to hold itself together after the Empire, after the Death Star, after the loss of an entire generation of leadership. He is pulling threads that are keeping that government from collapsing into warlordism. And he's pulling them not because he has a better plan for governance, not because he's offering an alternative political structure, but because those threads are in the way of his personal pilgrimage. And that's the thing about people who claim they're operating on a higher plane. They never actually leave the ground. They never actually stop affecting the people below them. Baylan doesn't get to walk into the mythic underworld and leave the New Republic to sort itself out. He doesn't get to pursue his origin quest in a vacuum. Every move he makes has a body count. Every alliance he forges to get closer to Peridea is an alliance that shifts power away from people who are trying to keep hospitals running and trade routes open and children fed. He doesn't get to opt out of consequence just because his goals are bigger than consequence. And there's a literal trail of chaos he leaves behind, and the narrative doesn't even bother to hide it. The New Republic is weaker because of him. Relationships that were holding the fragile peace together are severed because of him. And he walks through all of it like it's weather, like it's just something happening around him that isn't his responsibility, because he's got somewhere more important to be. And that specific quality, that ability to walk through destruction and feel nothing because your eyes are fixed on a horizon no one else can see, that is not the mark of a man who's transcended violence. That is the mark of a man who has made peace with being its cause. And underneath all of it, underneath the rhetoric and the philosophy and the ancient texts and the star maps, there's something uglier, something he won't say out loud, and it's this. Baylan Skoll believes that only he can fix it. Not the Jedi Council, not the New Republic Senate, not 1,000 years of accumulated wisdom and communal effort. No, him, one man with his specific insight, his specific vision, his specific willingness to go where others won't. And that belief, that singular, unshakable conviction that the solution to a galactic problem lives inside one person's skull, is not enlightenment, it is ego. It is the most refined, most spiritually decorated form of ego imaginable, but it is ego nonetheless. It is the same ego that makes a Sith Lord say, "I alone will reshape the galaxy." It just wears a more sympathetic face. It speaks in softer tones. It says, "I do this for everyone," instead of "I do this for myself," but the architecture underneath is identical. One man, above all others, holding the answer, and everyone else is just material, just scenery, just collateral in the story of his personal transcendence. And this brings us to the part of the argument that I think will make people uncomfortable. The part where I say the thing you're not supposed to say about Baylan Skoll, which is that he is functionally, structurally, philosophically a Sith. Not in the aesthetic sense, not in the does he have a red lightsaber sense, but in the sense that actually matters, the sense that defines what the Sith are at their root. The Sith, at their core, are not defined by the dark side. That's a common misunderstanding. That's the surface level reading. The Sith are defined by a specific relationship to the Force, which is ownership. The Jedi say the Force flows through all things and we are its servants. The Sith say the Force is a resource and I am its master. And everything else, the lightning, the choking, the emotional manipulation, it all flows from that one foundational premise. The Force exists for me, not I for it. And what does Baylan Skoll do? He looks at the Force and says, "I need to find where you came from, I need to find your source, I need to go to the place where you were born, and I need to understand you at the root level." And on the surface, that sounds like scholarship. That sounds like a monk going to the library. But think about what it actually implies. If you find the origin of the Force, if you find the beginning, the first cause, the prime mover, what does that give you? It gives you leverage. It gives you the position of the one who was there before everything else, the one who stands at the root of the tree while everyone else is up in the branches. It gives you the power to say, I understand this thing in a way no one else does, and therefore I have authority over it and over everyone who uses it. That is not enlightenment. That is sovereignty. That is the exact same impulse that drives every Sith Lord who ever lived to seek immortality, to seek dominance, to seek a form of existence where they are outside the system, above the system, looking down at the system. Palpatine wanted to rule the galaxy. Baylan wants to precede the galaxy. And I would argue, and I will argue this until someone convinces me otherwise, that wanting to precede is more dangerous than wanting to rule, because a ruler can be overthrown, but a man who positions himself at the origin of all things has made himself unfalsifiable, unchallengeable beyond critique. You can't argue with the source. You can't hold the beginning accountable. And that is the ultimate power play, dressed up in the language of humility. And then there's Shin Hati. And I need to talk about Shin Hati, because I think the way Baylan treats her is the single most revealing thing about his character, more revealing than any monologue, more revealing than any ancient text he deciphers. Shin Hati is 17. She is his apprentice, his student, the person he took in, the person he shaped, the person who trusted him with her formative years. And when she ceases to be useful, when she no longer serves the trajectory of his quest, he discards her. He doesn't kill her, which would at least be honest, which would at least be the Sith. He just leaves. He walks away. He lets her fall. And he does it with this calm, this terrible paternal calm, as if he's setting down a tool he's finished using. And people will say, well, that's the Sith rule of two. That's the master and apprentice dynamic. The apprentice must eventually be surpassed or discarded. And yes, fine, that's the structural parallel. I'll grant you that. But the rule of two at least has the decency to be a relationship, a brutal one, a violent one, but a relationship, where both parties are in the room, where the confrontation happens face to face. Baylan doesn't even give Shin that. He doesn't give her the dignity of a confrontation. He just removes himself, and she's left standing there, confused, bleeding, trying to figure out what she did wrong, and the answer is nothing. She did nothing wrong. She just stopped being relevant to his itinerary. And he frames this, and this is the part that makes me genuinely angry, he frames this as transcendence. He frames leaving her as a philosophical act, as the necessary severing of attachment, as the price of higher understanding. And that framing is obscene, because what it actually is, what it actually says, is that a human being, a living, breathing, feeling person who trusted you, is less important than an idea in your head. That a girl's love and loyalty are worth less than a myth you're chasing. That the bond between two people, the thing that actually makes the Force alive, the thing that connects it to the living world, is an obstacle to be cleared away so you can get to your precious origin. And if that's not the Sith, if that's not the philosophy that says the individual is fuel for the will, then I don't know what the word means anymore. Baylan Skoll is a Sith who reads poetry. He's a Sith who quotes ancient texts and stares at sunsets and talks about cycles. But the engine underneath, the actual operating principle, is identical. The Force is mine to master. People are instruments. The mission is everything. And anyone who gets in the way of the mission, even the child you raised, even the person who called you teacher, gets left in the dirt. And now, I want to pull back and talk about what the Jedi are actually supposed to be, because I think we've lost the thread. I think in all the prequel-era politics and the sequel-era nostalgia, we've forgotten the actual, basic, unglamorous purpose of a Jedi Knight. And it's not to find the origin of the Force. It's not to solve the metaphysical puzzle of existence. It's not to stand on a mountaintop and contemplate the infinite. It's to help. It's to show up. It's to be present in the mess and the suffering, in the small, unheroic, uncinematic daily grind of keeping people alive and keeping systems functioning and being a steady hand when everything is falling apart. The Jedi serve the living Force, and the living Force is not an abstract concept. It is the farmer on the outer rim whose crop is failing. It is the refugee convoy that needs escort. It is the child who is Force-sensitive and terrified, and needs someone to say, you're not broken, you're not a weapon, you're a person. That is the work. That is the actual unglamorous, never-ending work of a Jedi. And it doesn't get you a statue, it doesn't get you a legacy, it doesn't get you a chapter in a history book, but it is the thing, it is the only thing that actually matters. And Baylan looked at that work, and he said, beneath me, he looked at the daily service of the living Force, and he said, that's not where the answer is. That's just maintenance. That's just keeping the machine running. I need to find the engineer. And in doing so, he abandoned the very thing that made him a Jedi. Not the rules, not the council, not the dogma, but the service. The commitment to be here, in this moment, for this person, in this specific, unrepeatable instance of need. And the galaxy needed him. That's the thing. The New Republic is not some abstract political entity. It is millions of people trying to rebuild after trauma, trying to trust again, trying to build institutions that won't collapse the next time a strongman walks in, with a fleet. And those people needed guardians. They needed Jedi. They needed someone to say, I am here, I am watching, I am invested in your survival. And instead they got Baylan Skoll staring at star maps. Baylan Skoll whispering about origins. Baylan Skoll walking further and further away from the people he was supposed to protect. Because the past is more interesting to him than the present. And that detachment, that specific quality of being adjacent to the galaxy rather than in it, is what turns a protector into a predator. Because when you stop being present, when you stop being accountable to the people around you, when you start treating the living world as a backdrop for your personal spiritual journey, you begin to consume rather than serve. You take resources, you take alliances, you take stability, and you give nothing back because your eyes are fixed on something else, something further back, something deeper, something that has nothing to do with the person standing in front of you asking for help. And that is the definition of a predator, not the snarling, violent kind, the quiet kind. The kind that takes and tells itself it's doing it for a higher purpose. And the irony, the bitter, perfect irony, is that Baylan claims to hate decay. He claims the cycle is rotting the galaxy, that the endless war is a disease, that he's seeking the cure. But he is the disease. His absence is the disease. Every moment he spends chasing an origin myth is a moment the New Republic is one guardian weaker, one voice of stability, quieter, one person less willing to stand between the vulnerable and the powerful. He is accelerating the very decay he claims to despise, not through action, but through withdrawal, through the simple, devastating act of choosing, I would rather be elsewhere. And this is where I need to talk about Luke, and about Rey, and about what it means to rebuild something that was broken. Because I think Baylan Skoll's story is not just his story, it's a warning, it's a diagnostic. It's a map of the exact failure mode that will destroy the next Jedi Order if they don't recognize it. Luke Skywalker is trying to rebuild. Rey is trying to rebuild. And the temptation, the enormous, seductive temptation, is to look backward. To look at what the Jedi were. To look at the ancient texts, to look at the first temple, to look at the origin, and say if we can just find what they had in the beginning, if we can just recover the pure form, the uncorrupted version, then we'll be safe, we'll be strong, we'll never fall again. And that temptation is Baylan Skoll. That temptation is Peridea. That temptation is the whisper that says the answer is back there, in the deep past, in the mythic age, and if you just dig deep enough, you'll find it. And it's a lie. It's the same lie Baylan told himself. Because the Jedi didn't fall, because they forgot their origins. They fell because they became rigid, because they became institutional, because they prioritized the system over the individual. And the solution to that is not to go further back. The solution is to be more present, to be more responsive, to treat every single person in front of you as the entire purpose of your existence, rather than as a stepping stone towards some grander metaphysical project. And we've seen where the go back to the beginning road leads. We've seen Malachor. We've seen Exegol. We've seen what happens when you dig down into the foundations of the Force. And what you find there is not wisdom, it's hunger. It's the accumulated weight of every ego that ever tried to master the infinite and was consumed by it. The origin is not a sanctuary. The origin is a grave. And every person who goes looking for it, who treats the Force as an archaeological site rather than a living relationship, ends up buried there. Ends up becoming part of the sediment, ends up as another cautionary tale whispered by the next generation of seekers who also think I'll be different, I'll survive it, I'll come back with the answer. You won't. You won't come back with the answer because the answer isn't there. The answer is here. The answer is in the choice you make right now, in this moment, in this room, about whether you will serve the person in front of you or walk past them towards something shinier. The answer is in the discipline of presence, the discipline of showing up, the discipline of saying, this is enough. This moment is enough. This service is enough. I don't need to find the engine room to justify my existence. And Baylan Skoll couldn't say that. He couldn't accept that the Force as it is, as it flows, as it lives is sufficient. He needed more. He needed the source, the root, the before. And that need consumed him, and it will consume anyone who follows him down that path. And it is the responsibility of every Jedi who comes after, Luke, Rey, all of them, to look at Baylan Skoll and say, not that way. Never that way. The answer is not behind us. The answer is in our hands, right now, in the work we are doing, in the people we are protecting, in the choice to stay. So here's where I land, and I'll be honest with you. I don't think this is a complicated conclusion. I don't think it requires a 12-step philosophical framework. I think it's actually very simple, and the simplicity is what makes it so hard to accept. Baylan Skoll wanted to be more than a servant. He wanted to be an architect. He wanted to stand at the beginning and shape the ending. And in reaching for that, he lost the only thing that actually mattered, which was the person standing next to him, the person who needed him, the person who called him teacher and meant it. He traded Shin Hati for a myth. He traded the New Republic for a star map. He traded the living force for a dead one, buried under a million years of silence, and he called it progress, and he called it transcendence, and he called it the breaking of the cycle. But the cycle didn't break. The cycle doesn't break because of one man's personal revelation. The cycle breaks when someone chooses every single day in small, unglamorous, unrewarding ways to be present, to be kind, to be accountable, to serve without the expectation of being remembered. The cycle breaks when a Jedi says, I don't need to find the origin. I just need to be here. I just need to help this person. I just need to do the next right thing. And that's not a lesser path. That's not a failure of ambition. That is the actual, the only, the sufficient work. And Baylan Skoll couldn't do it. He couldn't be sufficient. He needed to be more, and in reaching for more, he became less. He became a ghost, a rumor, a man walking toward a horizon that doesn't exist, leaving behind a trail of people who loved him, and a galaxy that needed him, and a girl who bled in the dirt and never understood why. And that's not transcendence. That's not philosophy. That's not breaking the cycle. That's just leaving. And the galaxy doesn't need you to leave. The galaxy needs you to stay. If you want to argue with me, if you think I'm being too harsh, if you think Baylan deserves more grace than I've given him here, good. Argue with me. That's the point. That's what this is for. But argue with what he did, not what he said. Look at the bodies. Look at Shin Hati. Look at the New Republic he walked away from. And then tell me, with a straight face, that the man who did those things is a liberator, and I will listen. But I won't believe you, because I've seen what he left behind, and no amount of poetry, no amount of ancient text, no amount of staring into the void and calling it wisdom changes what that looks like from the ground, from the dirt, from the place where the people he was supposed to protect are still waiting for him to come back. He's not coming back. He never was. He chose the myth over the living. And that's not a moral gray area. That's a choice. And choices have weight. And this one, this specific choice, is the heaviest thing in the galaxy, and it will crush every Jedi Order that tries to build itself on the same foundation, until someone, finally, learns the lesson. Stay. Serve. Be here. That's the Force. That's all it ever was. And it's enough. It was always enough.